Hey, you are listening to the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that creates content to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and on this episode, we are going to be bringing it on because I am joined by the lovely pair that make up the Love What I Love podcast to talk about the new sci-fi original movie, Bring It On, Cheer or Die. Andy and Masha, how are you guys doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Got my spirit fingers and I am ready to go.
Nice, nice. Yeah, great, doing great. Happy to be here.
Yeah, happy to be back. We haven't been here since we took Good Burger way back when.
Yeah, yeah. So Andy's been Andy's appeared on Abyss Gazing a couple times last year. We did like crossover stuff last October, and Andy will be back talking about Halloween Ends later in this month. So just get used to his voice. But for any new listeners that have not checked out the Good Burger episode, tell us a little bit about what I Love is all about.
So Love What I Love is a podcast Masha and I do together. It's essentially week by week, we each pick a movie the other person isn't that familiar with, but means something big to us. And we kind of show it to them to have them see it with some fresh eyes. We share why we love it. And it's basically one big hour-long plea to get the other person to love a movie you love. And all in all, it's an excuse to just kind of revisit some classics you grew up with, whether it's a nostalgia love or a real love.
Yeah. And as a couple, it's just a great way for us to share our experiences, different things we love, have, various conversations around various IP because we have different tastes. So it's a great way for us to come together and see some great stuff.
Yeah, and Josh, our tastes, which is I think the reason why you picked us for today, but you can explain why.
I do. You guys did an episode of your podcast, I think it was last year, and then you guys actually covered the original Bring It On, and I will provide a link in the description below. I feel like I take a little bit from both of your tastes, which is why I like your show. Because like Masha's taste in movies is kind of like, this is what I grew up with. Like, I don't think there's maybe like a small handful of movies that are Masha's picks that I'm like, I've never seen these movies before. And then Andy's is like much more like kind of like prestigious, like / horror movies, which is kind of where like I feel like I'm now as an adult cinephile, but I love to kind of take a stroll down memory lane with Masha when I listen to your show. So sorry, Andy.
Yeah, no worries at all. No, and Masha makes me remember too that sometimes I can get a little too snobby and I forget that a lot of these movies are real fun. And she'll throw them on, and I would have never have thought to watch it, and then all of a sudden I'm giggling along with A Big Fat Liar or something like that.
Oh yeah, and same goes here. I mean, yeah, you got some good picks in there that you've showed me. So
all right, yeah.
All right. So I don't think I asked you guys this the last time, and we'll get back into Bring It On in a second. But what is your favorite film that you guys have made each other watch? So like Masha, what's the best pick that Andy's shown you, and Andy, what is the best pick that Masha's shown you?
That's really hard, actually. I feel like there have been a lot of surprising films that I never thought I'd like. But I mean, immediately when you asked that question, I thought of Sunset Boulevard. I really enjoyed that film. And being John Malkovich was just such a crazy journey that I was like, what the hell is this movie? I don't know if you've seen either of those, but those are the two that come to mind.
I love Being John Malkovich. I saw it way too young. I probably saw it when I was like 11 or 12, and I was like, this is insane. And his follow-up to that movie, Adaptation, is equally just bonkers and crazy and brilliant.
Oh yeah, no, Adaptation is so good. I'll show you that eventually. We'll be covering that on the podcast soon, Masha.
Nice.
I'm trying to think for ones that Masha's shown me that I really loved. I mean, it's kind of like her favorite movie, and she's I don't want to say bullied me into liking it because she made me watch scenes for 8 years before we finally got to watch the whole thing. But I gotta
That's
say,
how you start a marriage.
Yeah, Dirty Dancing really, really caught me off guard, and I like it a lot. That was a movie I was always just like a snobby teenage boy about. Like, I don't need to watch Dirty Dancing, and I was so wrong. That movie's great.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird how those like dance movies from like the 80s, whether you're talking about that or Footloose, like you just kind of like, it'll be fine. Then like you like actually see it and you're like, all right, I stand corrected. Like my wife, when we first started dating, was like, oh, you guys see this movie. It's like one of the greatest movies ever. And it was The Princess Bride. And I hated it the first time I saw it because I was like, I pre-programmed my brain to like say, you know, this is gonna be terrible. This is like I felt like the grandson, like this is a kissing book, like this is gonna be dumb.
Yeah.
And it is probably one of the movies that we watch together at least once or twice a year.
Oh wow.
That's awesome.
So
that's cool. Yeah, that is a good. I was a little similar with that movie too, where it didn't really hit me at first, and then over time, I was like, "This is a pretty magical movie here."
Yeah, I got to revisit that. I haven't watched in a long time. I feel like it should be one of my favorites.
It's crazy how like timeless that movie is, and just like how it embodies so much in like such a short period of time, where it's like it's going after fantasy romance. It's got swashbuckling. It's got great action sequences. There's great comedy in it, and it somehow marries all of the subgenres to be like a really unique experience.
And it has that wrestler,
Andre the Giant.
Oh yeah. That guy's got a great. It's got a great documentary on him. I think it's on Showtime. It's so good.
Yeah, I still haven't seen that one. It's been on my list for a couple years now, but
it's kind of like heartbreaking when you learn about his day-to-day life and how hard it is to just be that big. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into Bring It On, where can people find the podcast?
You can find our podcast pretty much anywhere podcasts are: Apple, Spotify, even the smaller ones like Podcast Addict. Pretty much anywhere podcast catchers exist.
And on social media at Love What I Love Podcast, LWIL Podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is the best of both worlds in this one because this is Bring It On, Cheer or Die. And Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have not seen anything past the very first Bring It On, correct?
No. Masha showed me a couple scenes from the one with Hayden Panettiere and Solange. Like a couple of dance scenes, and then we did attempt to watch the last movie, which I think was called Worldwide Cheer Smack. We made it about, I would say, 8 minutes, and then we said, let's cut this off, and we just stopped watching it. So basically this is as much as this is the most I've watched of anything other than the first one.
Cheer Smack is real rough. It's real rough.
It started because it had Cheernonymous, right? It was like Anonymous but for Cheers. Yeah, it was a rough one.
Yeah, and I just like as there's, because I don't know if you guys actually made it through, but there's a Vivica A. Fox is in it.
Oh really?
And
what?
Yeah, so like I'm just imagining like underneath like all of her appearance, it's just the sound of a large truck just backing up to her estate with a lot of money. Like this entire budget just went to Vivica A. Fox.
Absolutely. Oh my god.
That or maybe she's having tax problems and she just had to take any job she could to something like that.
I mean, it took Nicolas Cage to some crazy places, so it's possible.
Exactly. Oh my god, I don't know Vivica A. Fox. I mean, I couldn't even believe, not that she's a star, but even that Missy Pyle was in this. I was like, somebody who's been in another movie is in this new one.
Yeah, that was a big surprise.
It's not in it very long, but I am curious to see where they take this in the future. So before we jump into it, though, Masha, what about you? Because I feel like me and you are kindred spirits when it comes to this franchise. Like, you might not absolutely love it, but you're still like I don't know, you've seen at least probably more than Andy.
Oh yeah, definitely seen more than Andy. This movie then inspired me to revisit like the old movies before we got on to chat about Cheer or Die.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a special place in my heart for Bring It On. Like the original Bring It On is just, I think every sequel can try. I just feel like every iteration of the movie kind of releases a part of the original, right? Like you have the bad audition sequence that's in 2, but not in 3 really. You have missing of the spirit stick. Like I just feel like a little bit is being taken away every time.
Like the opening dream sequence, like that wasn't in this one.
Yeah, so it just made me a little more nostalgic for those scenes, which is why I revisited. But yeah, I think after the 3rd one, I gave the 4th one a shot, and I'm curious. I kind of want to revisit Cheer Smack.
It's so bad. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
And I think I looked it up. This one is technically part 7, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I got excited too because if you the Beacon Pictures was at the top, and so like the same font, I was like, "Ooh, okay, like how much are we gonna see here?"
Yeah, I was a lot like you. Like I watched it up to part 3, and part 3 is the one with Solange and Hayden Panettiere. I used to play that like all the time on like ABC Family, and so like my sister and I like watch those movies all the time, and I like still to this day, like my wife and I quote the first Bring It On at least like once a month. It's one of those movies that like was kind of like a gateway for me, where it opened up my love and appreciation for like other chick flicks, or like female centric stories. Like Mean Girls is arguably my second favorite film of all time, and like I don't think that I would have that infinity for it if it wasn't for Bring It On. Like Bring It On kind of like really shepherded a lot of those like Pitch Perfect and stuff like that. And the sequels, like you said, like the sequels, like there's a little like nugget of like the original in the sequels, except for 5 and 6, where they kind of just become weird Step Up ripoffs. But yeah, no,
that's
like
another franchise to dig into.
Andy, I pray for your soul if she ever makes you watch Step Up.
I've seen it, one dance sequence from Step Up 3D. Was it 3D, Masha?
Yes.
It's crazy. I've watched it like 6 times on YouTube. I don't know what's going on before or after it, but that one sequence is crazy.
But it's the same deal. Like if you look
enough.
up Step Up 1, it's completely different.
Yeah, and like there's like that's a weird franchise because it goes into like different like flavors of like dance and stuff like that. And I feel like you could do that, but like cheerleading is pretty much just like straightforward. Yeah. And it's interesting to me that like here you have sci-fi that comes along and it's like, we're gonna reinvent this franchise and we're gonna make it a slasher. And I don't know how if you guys keep up with the sci-fi movies. I guess this is more of an Andy question, but like this isn't the first time that they've done something like this. They did a few years ago. They did the Banana Splits movie, which was like took the Banana Splits cartoon from the 70s and like made them like slashers. I
had no idea.
It was a lot of fun.
Oh man, that went right over my head. I actually don't. Masha used to work for Sci-Fi, and I feel like I was more in tune with what they were doing back then when she worked there. But now it's like I watch Chucky, and then I think I don't really check out the channel too much, to be honest.
Yeah, that's about it for me. I'm just like Chucky. That's it. But like it's not the first time that they've reinvented it. So I am curious to hear what you guys thought about this reinvention of the Bring It On series. Andy, since you love this franchise so much, why don't you go first?
Yeah, as a lifelong head of Bring It On, as we all know.
Okay.
I mean, right off the bat, like the fact that they made it a slasher clearly worked in its favor because I'm someone. My apologies. Down. Jesus, sorry, my dog is in the house. I clearly haven't thought about watching any of these movies since part one, and the only reason I came to this one is because of the horror elements. So like clearly they made the right choice for trying to get some new blood into watching these movies. And I was intrigued with how it was going to go, and I was hoping. I didn't really know what I wanted because I did want it to be campy, and I was kind of in my head envisioning the Boy Meets World horror episode where
yes.
for 22 minutes it becomes a slasher, but like it's really like playing with the tropes and stuff. But I don't know, once it started I kind of remembered what we were dealing with here in terms of budgets, and like when you're in a part 7 of a franchise where there's not a lot of hype around it. If you didn't text me about this, I wouldn't even know this existed. I haven't seen any advertising. Like anyone I've mentioned it to didn't even know it was coming out. So once like we actually got into the realness of it, and I realized it was going to be an hour and a half of not the best acting, and I don't know if you noticed it, but the most clearly foam weapons I've ever seen in any movie. Anytime they had a close-up of a knife or an axe, it was completely made out of foam. So anyway, I wanted the camp, but then once I got it, it was a little bit of a like careful what you wish for, because I did find it kind of boring, except for, there were some kills I thought were kind of interesting, but all in all, it was it kind of reminded me why this franchise hasn't gone to theaters or had Kirsten Dunst come back or anything like that.
I was holding off my breath. I got done. I was like, Andy hated this movie. Credit start rolling. I was just like, Andy hated this movie. This is going to be a very interesting podcast.
Yeah.
But Lasha, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, just to think of what I love about the original movies, if I'm being honest, you know that I love dance movies. So when it comes to Bring It On, I'm like, okay, what are these routines gonna look like? I'll tolerate the horror, sure, but let's have some good dance routines in there. And I don't think that I got that here. I was mentioning to Andy, it's another observation. Sorry to keep going back to the original, but what I love about 1, and I think they do this like maybe up to 3, is they actually dance to the beat of the music rather than like maybe throwing a song onto a routine in post. And that was true for this iteration of Bring It On as well. So I was really looking forward to seeing like how they approach the routines here and what that balance was going to look, horror and cheer, like how much of each. Yeah, I wasn't super impressed if I'm being honest, overall, with this. One thing I don't like is when you can feel or when you could see the acting, like when you know that somebody is acting versus like actually being able to sort of accept the world as is. And sure. I think with sci-fi shows and movies, sometimes like it's pretty easy to like see the acting, and that I saw a lot of that here.
I think it really depends on the script for sci-fi, like in particular, because Slumber Party Massacre last year, I felt like it was like a really strong remake that they had done, and it balanced its like campy homage to the original 80s classic, but also managed to like reinvent itself and kind of like also at the same time kind of address like subjects of trauma and like how trauma can be passed down to new generations, and kind of like how those new generations process the trauma of having a parent that has been traumatized. And but I think with Bring It On, I think you have a franchise that, like Andy said, like hasn't been in theaters in a long time. The last several films that they've had, while they have been fun, some have been fun and some have been just downright like very hard to watch. It feels like I would rather stick like needles in my eye than to have to watch those movies again. And yeah. I think it just kind of continues suit. I had a lot of fun with this movie. It's like Andy said, like it's it's got that camp, and I think, but also at the same time, like, it doesn't really feel like a Bring It On movie because there's not a whole lot of cheerleading. And I have this like love-hate relationship with the way that cheerleading is used in this movie, because it's very minimal that they have it in this movie. But I think the way that they use it is an interesting approach, an interesting spin on the slasher genre.
Yeah, I would agree. It also just felt like a little small to me. But again, that must have to be with the budgets and everything like that.
Yeah, it's really hard when you just don't have the money to have like the big crowd scenes, and like even the opening when it's supposed to be kind of like a big cheer competition without ever cutting back to a stand full of roaring people or anything. It just has that, it just, yeah, like feels small. And we went back and just watched like 3-4 dances from that first movie, and you're like, oh, the energy alone is just something that just isn't there when they're dancing in this movie.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like, I don't know if you guys like stayed afterwards, but like the credits, like the title sequence at the end was like them like learning the cheers and like learning the dance moves, and you like look and you see like how many like people are involved, and you're like, where are all these people throughout like the majority of the actual film? Because like you're right, it does miss a lot of like the energy that you have with the first film. And like, for as much as I will like talk trash on like Cheer Smack, like that is one thing that I feel like that opening sequence does fairly well, is you can kind of feel a lot of that energy, a lot of the stakes of the cheerleading that the first film had.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting point to talk about what you had mentioned of like how they use cheer in this movie. And I don't know how you feel, Josh and Andy, but like, do you wish that there was more horror in the like actual cheer? I don't know how they would do it, but like, how do you feel in the level of horror that and like how it was implemented in this?
I mean, I don't really want to say like they should have incorporated more horror in the cheer, because yeah, like I don't really know what that would mean exactly. It was more, I knew that they were going to somehow use cheer to save the day at the end, and I was curious at how they were going to pull that off, and it was a little silly. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just like the PG-13 style of the horror. It was fine, and like I said, I love that Boy Meets World episode. But I think what helps is that it's only 22 minutes. I think if they tried to make a 90-minute version of that, it does get a little bit kind of slow and all that. But I will say, I mean, if we're gonna talk specifics, like there was one particular kill I thought was pretty effective. I don't know. Are we talking? How specific are we talking here, Josh? Are we ruining?
Yeah, let's jump into the spoilers real quick. If you guys haven't seen Bring It On, Cheer or Die, it is now able to stream with rent, or you can sign up for a free trial on Syfy.
Sweet. So yeah, it was I can't remember the character's name because it was hard to remember their names, but it was the second kill, and it was when he put I think it was like the blood pressure machine around the girl's neck and kept squeezing it closer and closer, and then used the paper cutter to cut off her spirit fingers. Like that, that was the one time I sat up in my seat and I was like, that was cool, creative, and kind of had a little in joke on the series because she cuts off the spirit fingers. And so I could have used something like that. Masha brought up the spirit stick when we were moving, and I was like, yeah, maybe if someone got beat to death with a spirit stick, that would be kind of funny.
And it's funny too, because I meant like, oh, maybe they could have incorporated like a supernatural, I don't know. But yes, spirit sticks. Hitting someone with the spirit stick could also work.
Yeah, so that was Tori's death, and I weirdly enough took notes during this movie. So like I have like very not a lot of notes because there's not a whole lot here, but like Tori's death is like so impressive. It's probably the most impressive set piece in this entire film, where like I was like, yeah, like I think you're right, like it's a really effective kill. And Masha, to answer your question, I feel like the horror aspect of this, and I don't know how you feel, Andy. I feel like the horror aspect of this felt like an afterthought for the first half of the film, and then they felt like they were playing catch up the back half of this movie.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I honestly, that beginning setup, I had to watch it a second time with subtitles on because I couldn't really figure out just the way it was filmed and blocked. That opening scene that takes place in 2002, we have where we have that one character who gets flicked on the nose, and then apparently that makes her entire nose bleed all over the place. And then she sneezes on top of the routine, and then they push her off the pyramid. It just seemed like a lot of weird interconnected things that I see that they were trying to set up a Scream whodunit, but there just wasn't enough characters that I wasn't able to guess the entirety of the killers, but I knew half of them immediately.
And your face blindness doesn't help either.
Yeah, I do have face blindness, so everyone looks the same and dresses the same. It's a rough go for me, but it was just like there wasn't enough characters to do a proper Scream whodunit. Like there was only like 7 of them, and I could just kind of guess right away who was behind the killing.
Yeah, I really wish that the horror aspects would have been implemented a little bit more. Like I don't know, you probably could have taken that instead of it being like this like vengeance trip that eventually kind of like serves as really a letdown in the last act of this movie, where it definitely should have been something like, oh yeah, like one cheerleader just, I don't know, drop this, bring it back to the spirit stick, bring it back to the original. Like one person just dropped the spirit stick at a cheerleading camp this past summer and now have been possessed by a supernatural serial killer. And like that would have been like a great setup to like just kind of like let it lie dormant for years versus them just being like, yeah, girl gets flicked on the nose, sneezes, falls, dies. Like that's
and also like
sorry. Go ahead.
All right. I was going to say, Josh, as someone who loves Scream also, Scream always does the obvious red herrings where they put someone right in your face who's like looks and acts like a killer just so they can switch it on you. So didn't you expect that with Missy Pyle as the principal? Because as soon as it cuts to her, she's holding a knife, she's grimacing, she's doing everything an evil person does over the top. So I was like, there's no way she's behind this because that would just be telegraphing way too much. You know what I mean? Like they didn't do the bait and switch. It just threw me off. I was like, really? It was her?
Yeah. I will say though that like the ultimate like reveal in the end of like who the killers are, like I was like, okay, like I did see it coming, but like it kind of makes sense. And then they gave them the like that monologuing background of like how they came to be, and I was like, this is just, wow, you took a great twist and you just wiped your own ass with it. Like, come on.
Yeah. Like I actually, because when I say I saw it coming, there was the 2 twin sisters who end up being the killer. One's on the cheer squad and one isn't. The one who isn't, I knew right away was the killer because we see her in one scene in the beginning and then she's not in the rest of the movie till the end. So I was like, there's only 7 characters in this movie. It's got to be her. I didn't actually see that it was going to be both twins at the same time. But if I can nitpick just the storyline wise, so if their whole motivation is they hate cheer so much that they want to kill the cheerleaders so there's no more cheerleading, why is the one chance that they give our heroes to save themselves is by cheering perfectly? They go, if you can cheer perfectly, we'll let you live. But what kind of motivation is that for 2 killers who hate cheer and want cheer to be dead? You know what I mean? Like, why do they even care? It just seemed like a weird conceit so they could say the phrase cheer or die in the end of the movie.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Because like there's one thing that like Bring It On has done, and for every one of its sequels is it has to find a way to bring in those 3 words, bring it on.
Yeah.
It's like a foundational like rule for this franchise. And when Gabrielle Union or Kirsten Dunst or Elijah Dushku say it in the original film, it's like, okay, like there's passion behind it, like conviction. And every other time it's just like, oh, you're here to collect a paycheck. And that's kind of how it felt. Like they're like, yeah, we're gonna do a game called Cheer or Die. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I don't know. Horror logic doesn't make sense to regular real world logic. So like to me, I was kind of just chucked it up to be like, okay, it's horror logic. But I mean, also at the same time, like it was fun. So
yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go back. I will defend this movie by saying I think there was a red herring. That kid who with his GoPro, I think his character's name was Quincy.
Evan.
His character's name was Ricky Fitz from American Beauty, because that's exactly who that was. Masha hasn't seen that movie, but I'm sure you have. All black mysterious character who films kids from far away and sells drugs. I was like, yeah, something tells me someone just watched American Beauty when they wrote this.
Yeah, I really like. He just seems like a character. It's like him and like also like the 2 other guys, Quincy and Tony, just felt like why are you in this to like to start? Like it just there's already like drama with the killer. Like the slasher genre already has built-in drama. Like you don't need to add drama, and that's kind of one of the weaker points of the story where it's like, oh yeah, we have these guy characters. Almost just to have guy characters, but you have 2 guys on the squad. So like I don't know, like the use of like the male element of this is really weird and underutilized in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I also didn't really understand Evan's motivations as a character. Like I understood that he liked Abby and wanted to like have a relationship with her, but like it just didn't seem enough to warrant like either rooting for him or like I just didn't know how to feel about him.
Yeah, what was the deal with him? Because isn't the last time we see him before he dies, he meets the ex-boyfriend at the gym and seemingly looks like he sells him drugs, but I couldn't really tell because the camera was far away. And then he says something like, "Don't worry about it, as long as I'm here for Abby's big scene or big break or something." I didn't really get any of that, what that meant.
So he is so the last time you see him, he was like knocking on the door and he gets killed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the last time we get to see him, and he is essentially kind of coming to the rescue is like what we're led to believe. But yeah, his like big thing is like there is a scene in the movie where they do talk about how like he had like a crush on her in like middle school, and like they had like stayed in touch and kind of like, they'd always been like friends, but like he wanted to be more than friends. And so it's kind of like that classic like archetype of like the best guy friend that has always kind of been just like friend zoned. And so because of that, I guess he's emo, and I can say that because I also identify as emo, so it's no shade at emo people.
Yeah. I also kind of want to talk about how insane that they included a stoner character in this movie, because I know that's a tried and true trope of slashers, and it's like they're paying homage, but I don't know. I remember high school and I remember the stoners, and I've never met someone whose interests aligned with cheerleading and weed smoking at that age. It just seemed like he didn't fit with that crew at all, and he was thrown in there just so we could have some weed jokes and do the stoner thing in a horror movie.
I didn't know that was a trope in horror movies.
It's like more... Cabin in the Woods did it the best, but in terms of commenting on it. But there's always kind of like one goofy character who's in the back smoking weed and like, whoa.
Yeah, I feel like that's more of a trope that was like for the 80s. It's not so much you don't see it that much in slashers nowadays.
That's true.
Like Halloween 2018, I feel like is kind of like another great example of that kind of like in modern day setting. But yeah, it's that was weird to me too. Like I was like, okay, like you're clearly just playing on the tropes, and I think in some ways the way that they play on tropes and is interesting, but also like the way that they kind of flip certain like tropes on their head was also really interesting to me too.
You guys know I'm not a horror fan, but
it's okay.
my one takeaway, because I know that they keep making these Bring It On movies, but I think if you're thinking about the true fans, the people who love it, they're sort of like around our age, a little older. So I kind of wish that the horror and like everything was like, I kind of wish it was like rated R. I know it's sci-fi and it has to be like good for television, but like I feel like the true audience would have appreciated this, like, they're rated at our age.
Andy can attest to this, that I would probably say it was like 2 to 5 minutes into the Chucky season 2 premiere, it dropped like 2 F-bombs. So like I won't say that like sci-fi is like above it, but I do think that this would have worked better as an R-rated film. It just kind of definitely seems like I don't know, like if you're gonna reinvent the franchise, I feel like you need to commit wholeheartedly to it. And I feel like for the most part, this like attempts to like do like 9/10 of the routine to bring cheer lingo into it, but it just doesn't stick the landing in terms of like its ending.
Yeah, I agree too that I think R would have been more fun, but I also don't believe that would have been just like a blanket that would have saved it, because I can think of movies, like I don't know why it popped in my head, maybe because it's a horror remake of a different thing, but like Happy Death Day I think is a fantastically fun horror comedy that takes the genre, makes it horror, throws tropes on its head, and that's PG-13 from beginning to end, and you don't even notice it. You really have a great time. So I don't want to just throw a blanket of being like, yeah, if there was more blood, this would have been better. In my opinion, I don't know how much that would have saved the movie, but I guess I would have at least looked forward to the kills a little bit more, because that first kill with the pom-pom was just so like goofy that I was like, oh man, I don't even think I'm gonna get much fun out of that. But then I was proven wrong. But the next kill was great, so it wasn't all bad, but it was a little just bloodless and goofy.
And I feel like too, like the reason that I, as a horror fan, love slashers is because I am a gore whore. Like I love to like see how creative and messy filmmakers can get, and I feel like having a like a bloodless movie in this case to chase after that PG-13, or in this case like a TV-14 viewing, it feels almost like watching your favorite band on mute. It just doesn't have that same effect, and you're just like left just like sad by the end of this movie.
Yeah, I kind of felt that way. Even like, so they kill the final girl by like running her over with a bus, but like you don't even see the body at the end, and I don't know if that's to imply that she might be back, but like they didn't they didn't do the scary stinger or anything, like, you know.
It could be planting a seed for a potential sequel, because you also see the mom in the audience at the end as well.
Yeah,
sort of with that.
But also, look. This is a franchise that famously never continues a storyline, so we'll see what happens. I'm waiting for Cheerleaders in Space, which is probably going to be the next one.
Wait, they got to go to the hood and then to space.
To the hood,
Yeah.
Cheerleaders in the hood.
I don't know. Like, if they decided that this is the route that they're gonna take for the next, like, 2 to 3 movies, I'd be okay with that. I feel like I've talked a lot of crap on this movie, but I had a lot of fun with it. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, this movie is like far from perfect and is filled with mistakes. But at the end of the day, like, it was a good, like, one time, like, watch. Maybe I'll watch it again, but I feel like it was still a fun film.
Yeah, as a guy who can just, turn off his pretentious with horror and just watch something goofy, I do agree that, like, I can't say I like the movie. That would just be lying. But if someone told me I had to watch any Bring It On from 4 through 7, I would probably pick this one without even thinking about it, because I'm just not that interested in the franchise. So if the whole thing is just mediocre dancing, then I'm gonna be bored. But at least this is some mediocre dancing with some kills and a couple of moments that I thought worked, and a bunch that probably didn't.
Yeah, I don't know, guys. I'd still rather watch Hayden Panettiere attempt crumping than revisit this one.
There are certain things about it, pop culture, we just don't need to bring up, and those sequences are really hard to watch. So you must really hated this movie.
It's so uncomfortable to watch. Yes.
I'm just glad we're done with the white guy rapper trope, because when Russia was watching Bring It On 2, they definitely had that, and I was like, 2004.
He wasn't Wait, you're talking about Bring It On 2?
Yeah, wasn't there a rapping guy?
No, he's a DJ. He's not rapping.
He was rapping about taking a pee.
You're not wrong. He was. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because I feel like they, in some ways, like, they've also perhaps, like, the famous rule of horror is that, like, if you don't see a body, then, like, they never died.
Yeah.
So you don't ever see, like, really any body in this one. I don't know. Maybe, like, they make it a supernatural slasher next time, where, like, the spirit stick resurrects them, and then they go back out after the Diablos. Talking about functionality, it's, when you look at, like, the annals of slashers, you have Freddy versus I don't know words. Freddy versus Jason. Freddy, Jason, Michael, Leatherface. Most guys, like Chucky, like most guys that are, like, like, not wearing a super lot, and our killer is, like, an actual, like, mascot slasher.
Yeah,
and
a big one at that.
Like, the functionality of this, like, I have so many questions, like, how to start, like, yeah,
I don't know. And where did you source a bow and arrow? Like,
well, they had survival training in their summers with their mom. They said that they learned all the survival training every summer.
Okay.
Sure. But yeah, again, not to bring up Happy Death Day again, but even that had a school mascot killer that was so effective, and so, like, I just kept thinking of that movie, and now I just want to go and watch it. I was like, that's a great high school based slasher movie.
Yeah, but that one was just like a guy in, like, all black with a baby mask.
Yeah, but that was still the school mascot. It was a giant baby.
That's fair, which is such a weird thing to have, but it is what it is. Yeah, this one was, like, just, like, really weird. Like, even, like, the way that, like, when you would see her, like, do kills in the suit, it just looked really awkward. And I don't know if, like, they did that to, like, as a way for perhaps to, kind of, like, maybe hide the squibs that would, like, explode, like, if they did actually kill the people on screen, or, like, to to kind of hide that. But it just looked really awkward to kind of, like, lug around.
Yeah, it didn't have that, like, when they would do the kind of Michael Myers shot of it, the mascot appearing in the background, it never really struck fear the way Elena, when you saw that big gut sticking out, it just kind of looked like a goofy baby.
Yeah, the face I thought was effective. Like, But yeah, I agree with the body.
Yeah, like if you're going to like go after like something like that, like I brought this movie up earlier, but like the banana splits kind of have like that same like stature, but they're also like animatronics. So I feel like it works so you can be kind of like creepy and like inventive there. And Willy's Wonderland behind me also is like another great example where you have like something that is evil animatronics that kind of embody like the shape and like style of the Diablo here, but it's used a lot more effectively. And I don't know, like putting a human in that suit kind of takes the magic out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Well,
I had another point. Oh, this is a stupid point. It doesn't really mean anything, but the Paige character, for some reason, to me, her face and hair and shape looked like a live action Arthur's sister, DW from Arthur. I don't know. I just look at a picture of her. It just the whole time I was like, if they ever do Arthur reboot in live action, this girl should play DW. She looked just like her.
I will agree.
Again, yeah, not a very critical point, but something I noticed.
Yeah.
But the foam weapons, Josh, did you notice the foam weapons, or am I alone in that? Like when she's holding the knife at the end to her throat, it's very much made of foam and painted to look like a knife.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
maybe I like wasn't like paying enough attention to that like particular like detail of the movie, but like given this budget, given everything else about it, like it doesn't really surprise me that they're like, let's bring it on.
It was the knife and the axe.
Phone
and
weapons.
The axe is in the stoner's head, and he's trying to say something poetic, and he like leans forward, and you see the axe. It's just give it another watch. It'll blow your mind how much it doesn't look like a real axe.
I just imagine like Andy like watching it and then like rewinding it. And he's like, hold up. He's like all serious and he's like walking up to the TV and he's like, this, like Googling like what a real axe looks like. He's like holding it side by side. No, this is faulty.
No, I did do that. I also rewound when the girl gets killed in the bathroom. She gets her head pulled out of the toilet, and then her head is bone dry for every single moment after that. There's not a drop of water on her head. So just little things like that.
Oh, the continuity.
Yeah, I could be no fun sometimes, but it's just what I notice.
I think sorry to go back, but I'm also realizing too, like I could have used a little more humor as well. You know, especially with the side characters.
I enjoyed the Tony and Tori like love like subplot that they had, where like she didn't understand like what she was sending him, and she would be like, tacos, and like he was sending like eggplant. She's like, he must really like eggplant, and like just that subplot of like when Tony finds out that she's a virgin, like screams in panic, like no way, like, this can't be real, this is a nightmare, or something like that. Like there were moments that like I found myself laughing, but I feel like I was laughing more at like the cheesiness of some of the dialogue in this than the actual like, oh, this is supposed to be a punchline.
Yeah, I agree. And it felt like they were in on the joke too a lot of the time. So I kind of like would rather have been like, oh, that's a hilarious moment that they don't realize just happened versus
And
them
yeah,
being like
and in my eyes too, like with horror comedy, I love it when it's great, but I'm often just critical about it too, because it's really hard to match that balance of having it be funny, but without having the characters not taking the situation seriously. And I think this movie kind of failed at that a little, where like the characters were so silly sometimes and being chased by the killer. I felt more like I was watching Scary Movie and not Scream. You know, like a good horror comedy still keeps the fact that these characters are in danger, but and it's still funny. But this one was just like sometimes they sacrifice all tension for a joke, and it kind of just made me feel more like I was watching a parody and not a real story.
Yeah, absolutely. Like horror comedy, I feel like is probably one of the hardest like genres to mesh. I feel like, you know, obviously probably one of the most famous examples that did it was Evil Dead 2. And it balances it so well. And like even Scream, like I would never consider Scream a horror comedy, but it balances its use of horror really well. But also at the same time, like it has those moments of like genuine clever humor. That is effective. And
I'm even
I feel go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I'm even thinking of an even sillier one, like Tucker and Dale versus Evil is a very silly movie, but you still believe that these characters are afraid for their lives, for the moments. Like it never really goes, like I said, into Scary Movie, which is fine. That's a type of movie, but like you got to throw all plot out the window if you're making a parody, and like, and so that's why this like I think it didn't want to be a parody, but it kind of came off as one to me.
I mean, I think you said it perfectly earlier that like, you know, there's only so much you can do when you're the seventh film in your franchise. And also a franchise that is like, I don't want to say not been desirable. But you know, I don't know. I don't, yeah. You know, when was the last time you heard someone talk about like Bring It On 4? You know, it doesn't happen.
No. Yeah, if anything, I'm just into, I don't know if you've watched, Josh, the cheer documentary series. That's been sort of my fix for cheerleading these days. It just follows this college cheerleading squad and making it to the champion. It's like the real life Bring It On, essentially. And seeing how they rehearse, everything that goes into it and all that jazz.
Well, now I feel like I have something to do with my life now, so thanks.
Josh, question for you, because we talk franchises constantly. Do you have a ranking of Bring It On movies? I'd love to hear it.
Oh, I do actually. Let me pull up my Letterboxd.
Nice. And Masha, if you wanted to impromptu a rank, I know you haven't seen them all, but
well, yeah, it's not fair. I mean, I could tell you my top 3, but yeah,
I guess with you, I'm more interested in top 3 because I know you haven't seen all 7, so it wouldn't even really be a proper.
Yeah,
rank.
But Josh, since you've watched them all recently, yeah, I definitely want to hear your list.
So you want to guess what the number 7 is? The bottom of the bottom.
I'm gonna get, just based on your tone when you talked about it, I'm gonna say Cheer Smack.
Exactly +1. Yep.
So it's Cheer Smack is number 7. Number 6 would be Fight to the Finish, which is
what number is that?
That is the 5th one, which sadly has Christina Milian in it. And it's so sad. Bring It On again. Bring It On All or Nothing. Bring It On Cheer or Die. Bring It On In It to Win It, and then the original Bring It On. Yeah, really? I've got some hot takes when it comes to this franchise. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm surprised like that this one's so high up there.
It is high up here because like I said, there's a lot wrong with it. This movie survives on horror logic, but I had a lot of fun with this movie. So like I think I put it as high on this list, as ranked as high as I did, because A, I'm a horror guy, and B, I feel like this movie makes dumb choices, but it doesn't have people crumping in this movie, so I have to give it that.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to come back to you with my full list. Now I'm gonna go and watch them all.
Well, we know you're number one, Masha, but what would you go 2 and
Yeah.
3?
Well, number 2 would actually be the Bring It On Again, because even though it's obviously has a lower budget and not as many well-known characters, I do think that it does do a great job of like having an original plot, and bringing in like various, if you don't know the premise of the movie, it's this girl goes to cheer for this squad, things happen, and then she ends up building her own squad with various clubs throughout campus that have lost funding because all the funding's going to this cheer squad. Felicia Day's in it, weirdly. I completely forgot about
That blew
that
my
when Andy
mind.
was
I love
watching
Felicia.
over.
I love Felicia
Yeah.
Day. I was like, I've never seen her play
She's
a
great
character
in
like
that.
this.
But it's just
Also,
really cool.
I enjoyed I
I'm like,
enjoyed the karate cheering as well when we watched it.
oh yeah, you got the karate club, you got the ballet club, you got theater in there, so it's just like pretty original, and I do like the routines. So yeah, that's been my number 2, and then number 3 is the Solange and Hayden Panettiere crumping. And then
Like,
Rihanna's in there. It's a great time. But
like the first like 3 movies, I feel like I like 2 and 3, like I love interchangeably, like for different reasons. Like they're all like, I will say like they're up there with the original, but like they are, they're decently entertaining. And they're great movies to throw on, like if I just need to like have a laugh, or like, I'm in the mood for like, I haven't watched a sports movie in a while. I need to, I want to see something like different. And kind of like, I feel like they use comedy different ways. Like, I definitely liked, like All or Nothing is the one with Solange and Hayden. And I think that one is super solid because of just like where it takes the characters to where it's a fish out of water story. Mm-hmm. And it's a fish out of water story, like about a girl that like really like needs to like humble herself and like just gets mad over the dumbest things, but like her character journey is so incredible.
Yeah, for real. And it touches on social dynamics and issues sort of in relation to the first movie, what we were talking about, or what they were talking about with the Clovers and versus Toros. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
And
I think quick, with Josh, this, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I've thrown this idea to Masha 1,000 times, and she's obviously on board. But as a fan of the original, how on board would you be if they Cobra Kai'd the series and made like a TV show where Kirsten Dunst and Gabrielle Union return as sort of like teachers or senseis, if you will, to a new cheer squad? What do you think about that?
God, I would love that, because not only just out of like nostalgia, but like Kirsten Dunst has become like a legitimate, like glorified, like legitimate actress in her own. For sure. Like I'm seeing her in like other roles, like whether you're talking about like Marie Antoinette or gosh, she did Melancholy, I think is the name of it. Like seeing her
Fargo
do, like,
season
stuff,
2 also blew my mind.
Yeah, and you're like, man, like this is the girl from like Drop Dead Gorgeous and Spider-Man and Bring It On. Like to see her, like I think that you could actually bring some depth to this character. And like Gabrielle Union has never, in my opinion, has never delivered a bad performance. As she's made questionable career choices, but she's never delivered a bad performance. And I think that like having the two of them together, like you could do a series that is on par with Cobra Kai and like brings in that nostalgia, but transitioning it to a series you have, and having both of those actresses on board, you have a chance to like make a deeply like intelligent show that like could thrive on its like emotional stakes and like have the acting to actually back up those emotional stakes.
Yeah, and I think the cheer in general is just a great, like, that's good for TV because you could have seasons long of training and stuff that generally gets boiled down to a montage in a movie. And I don't know, I think it'd be pretty cool.
All right,
Yeah.
so if I'm gonna pitch what the title for this show, it's got to be called Spirit Fingers.
Oh,
Ooh, that's
I
pretty
mean,
good.
yeah.
I was thinking that, or I love Cobra Kai so much that I always want to just rip it off. So I was also just thinking of calling it like Clovers or something, like or Clover. Just name of the team, Maybe by
Yeah.
some reason Kirsten Dunst ends up like coaching the new generation of Clovers for some reason, like they switch it.
Mm.
I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like maybe Big Red could take on the Crease role.
Yeah, I'm about it.
That's pretty good.
One of the things that I feel like, like we said, like this movie is like it's coming back to cheer or die. It's a traditional slasher, not a whole lot of depth here. But one of the things that I found interesting is the way that this film uses mental health. And we talked about this on That's High Praise a couple episodes ago, which is our Nicolas Cage podcast. Go check it out. But they, the way that like they kind of use generational expectations, to where Paige is a character that, Abby's a character that essentially is only a cheerleader because of her mom. She's kind of got this like unfair, high expectations placed on her. And then on the flip side, you also have our two twin killers that also are, they have that montage of like, yeah, we hunt, we killed because like this is what we were told to do. You're indoctrinated that this is your value, this is your worth. And I feel like a lot of that, those things can like really like mess with not only your own self-worth, but also like your sense of identity as well. And living up to those expectations can really kind of mess you up and not only like your relationships, but like your actual like day-to-day life.
Yeah. And even challenging those expectations, which is what essentially Abby's character does. She's trying to be the opposite of what her mother was or what her mother did.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably the most interesting line in the movie was when Paige and Abby are facing off on the roof and she's just trying to plead to her, being like, we don't need to continue like the paths our mom set for us. There's no reason, like we don't have any problems with each other. We shouldn't be doing this. And the movie doesn't really explore it that much, but that was the one time where I heard something where I was like, oh, there's like a little nugget of a story here that could actually be pretty cool to tell.
Yeah, I don't know. It's something that like, and I don't know like what you guys grew up with, but like my dad had his own business growing up, and it was detailing cars. It's my first job, and God, I hated that. I hate it. Just it was cool to be like 13, like have like extra money to like just kind of like show off and stuff like that. But like my dad would like sit down, we'd have conversations and would be like, yeah, like when you turn 18, like this is all going to be yours. And like it eventually like went up a couple years after my dad started it, but like just the fear of like being expected to like take over something that like I'm not passionate about, I could care less about, like really like mess with like my sense of like self and like my own like self-worth, where I'm like, man, is this all I'm gonna be for like the rest of my life?
Yeah, that's a lot to think about, especially when you're not sort of being taught to make or taught to sort of like embrace or like listen to your inner self in a way, like what are your true passions, and you're not being like guided to follow that voice. It could be hard for sure. I know I've had to do some sort of that self-discovery as well. I work in TV, but my mom always envisioned me being in front of the camera, but I'm not like necessarily wanting to do that, like and then making them proud, wanting to make them proud because you're their, but also finding that balance of you have to be true to yourself and follow your own path.
Yeah, it's a real double-edged sword to go through, because like at the end of the day, like I've been moved out is the proper term. of my parents' home for over 12 years now, and I am, now I've been married for the past 8 years. I've lived on my own. I've toured the country. I've done other things, and I am the only person in my family that listens to heavy metal. I am one of the very few people that watch horror all year round in my family. And so it's I was also one of the only people in my family that read comics. So it's I got it, man. I feel you 100%. It's you can't allow what other people envision for you, bless you, be devoted to who you are, because at the end of the day, you're having to live with yourself, and you have to understand that your decisions are going to affect you and the people that you're living with and interacting with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I think all of us have gravitated towards TV and films, because I feel like it's just that sort of story that people continue to go through and will continue to go through, sort of just going against the grain and being true to yourself sort of thing. As far back as Cheer or Die might be on my list, I do appreciate that.
Yeah, I gotta give you props, Josh. That was a way deeper takeaway from this movie than I would have guessed possible after I watched it. Maybe I just wasn't thinking from that angle, but that was a nice nugget to come out of this movie that on paper probably most people wouldn't think they'd come away, contemplating some parent versus child life choices.
Yeah, and I really hope that I don't know. I know that we want to create content at the end of the day that is thought provoking, and yeah, we've spent the last hour critiquing, tearing this movie apart, and kind of dipping into the original series as well. But I think at the end of the day, this movie does say a lot about the choices that the choices that not only generational trauma has on an individual, but also the expectations that can be for someone. Because Abby as a leader is also kind of very shy, very intimidated. It kind of, you almost get the sense that her home life is this yes ma'am, yes sir kind of thing, to where she's always kind of got to be almost militant in the way that she operates herself.
I would have loved to dig deeper into how her life is at home. Just knowing that your mom did that is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I couldn't tell. Did she know that her whole life? Because when Paige says something like, your mom did this, and she's like, I know what my mom did. I'm not my mom. And I was like, whoa, your mom killed somebody in high school? I was just I couldn't tell if she was finding that out in the moment, or she's like, oh yeah, no, I knew that already. Because it kind of makes it a little bit more of a
I don't necessarily think that a parent's gonna be yeah, I accidentally killed a girl from in this cheerleading accident in 2002, but I don't know, she probably yeah, I watched somebody die, it traumatized me, or I got blamed for it, she would spin that. She seems like she would have the type of personality where she would be the victim.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think we have driven this movie into quite a lot. So if you guys are fans of Bring It On, what do you guys think of the franchise? What are your memories with the original one? Have you seen this one? Let me know. Tweet to us at Victims and Villains. And speaking of the socials, hit us with the socials one more time, please.
Yeah, that would be at LWIL Podcast. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram, and our podcast can be found wherever you get your podcasts. So check us out. I love what I love.
Yes. Well, Andy is going to be returning for Halloween Ends this upcoming week, but
so excited. I just rewatched Kills a couple days ago just to get my mind right.
Yeah. So speaking of kills, you guys can check out our episode because Andy was our guest last year for Halloween Kills, and curious to see, what comes of it this year. But you guys can, if you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, depression, mental addiction, or self-harm, click the links in the descriptions below to check out our mental health resource library. And you guys can follow us everywhere at Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, and of course, wherever you guys get your podcasts from. We're also on Patreon. And so until next time, remember to cheer your heart out with spirit fingers.
Spirit fingers.